I'm back from my trip to Auckland. That was an interesting trip. It was good to catch up with Pete and see his workshop and all the interesting cars and things there. That was really cool. And I did go to a few other places. Motat, I think I got a little bit of footage there. The Domain and the museum, War Memorial Museum. But I don't miss Auckland. So it was nice to come back to my shed, and I'm glad I cleaned it up before I left, so I came back to a nice clean shed, which is always good. And while I was away, another gadget I'd ordered arrived, and this is so that I can accurately weigh the car, because the results I was getting with my scales and lever were a bit inconsistent. So I bought one of these crane scales because I've obviously got the girder, and because there's no mudguards on the car at the moment, it's actually pretty easy for me to hook a rope through the wheel and just lift the wheel off the ground. And if I do this for each corner, I can get the corner weights, and I don't need to muck around with blocks or leveling the car. You only need to lift it just off the ground to get the measurement, and that should tell me pretty accurately what each corner of the car is weighing, and therefore what the car weighs. I have got the battery in place. I will put the door in place, and I might put a few other bits and pieces on there. Well, I can measure them later separately, but this should give me the weight, which should be quite interesting. This thing, when it arrived, was already half broken. Obviously, it's just cheap. It's from China, of course. There was a rattling noise inside it, so I opened it up to have a look. And there's effectively a strain gauge in here, like a load cell type thing. There's not much to these, so even the cheap ones should be reasonably accurate. But one of the screws holding the actual cell in place had come loose and was floating around inside there, and the other one was not tight at all either. It was a simple matter just to tighten that up, put it back together, and now I should be able to, that's the wrong way, and you should see when it starts taking the load. Helps if I don't have the hold on. So I did test how accurate this was by basically sitting in the sling and lifting myself off the ground, and it gave me an accurate weight. So that wheel should be off the ground almost. Oops, wrong way. Yeah, so that's off the ground now. You can see it's not changing the measurement. I don't know how much inaccuracy there is because you're lifting one corner only. I don't think it'll be too much. So that gives me what, 154 kg, 154.6. When I measured this with the scales, I got 160 the second time I did it, 140 the first time I did it. I can't remember if I had all the frame built then or not. I think I did. Oh no, I didn't. I hadn't. I measured the frame separately afterwards. So between 140 160, that's probably about right then. So I'm going to do this for each of the corners. With the crane thing, it's on casters, so I can move it backwards and forwards. This is what I'm going to use when the body is built, I'll probably make some sort of cradle or something so that I can use this to lift the halves of the body up and down by myself. The only problem with this crane is to roll it forwards, you have to sort of walk it forwards a little bit. If I just push it here, it just rotates. So you either need two people to walk it forwards at the same time, or you just shuffle it forwards a bit at a time. But I'm gonna measure the other corners and see what the total weight is at the moment. So weighing the car like that worked reasonably well. In order to see if the wheels were off the ground at the back, I actually slid a piece of aluminium plate underneath them to make sure they were lifted. At the front, it's pretty easy to tell because you can move them because they're not driving anything. And the numbers I got with these in kg, so at the moment the whole thing seems to be about 650 kg, 52 to 48 front rear split. I should probably do it when it's sitting on the actual concrete, not on a carpet, but that's a good enough estimate for now. I suspect the rest of the body and everything will add at least another 50 kg. But that's not too bad. I think the rated curb weight for these I think that's with a tank of fuel, I'm not sure if that's with or without the driver, was about 800 kg, so I'm looking on track for that. Now I have to think what I need to do next. I need to get in touch with the place in Australia about these hinges, because I'm still waiting for the other two hinges to arrive, and I don't want to start modifying things or actually fitting these until I know I can get two more the same. So until I've got them here, I don't really want to start cutting the doors or the frame to mount them and figure out where the holes need to go and where they need to be cut, because they are over length. That's why I needed these ones and not the brass ones, because these were too short. So I'm waiting for that. I need to figure out this, because once you've got the adapters and bits and pieces on it, it gets too big. I really just need a sort of right angle adapter here so I can have the two lines to the tank and one outlet up to the fuel pump. What else do I actually need to do? I may assemble the headlamps. I have ordered nuts and bolts and things from the UK. I'm not sure where they're at yet. I haven't seen anything about that. And I need to finish up the bits of flooring, the cross members and things. I was looking at using 2mm aluminium for the floor, but now that I know I'm going to build the body from steel, it should mean that somewhere over here I need to really organize all my bits and pieces, because I'm not even sure what I've got now. I have got some Zintex steel. I can't remember what that is. I do have aluminium, which will be 1.6mm aluminium. That may be enough to do the under tray. The only place that really worries me is in here where this piece of floor is, because you can stand on that. Well, it's actually pretty tricky to stand on that, but it will take a bit of weight. But of course with the bead roller I could roll stiffening beads into it if I need to, so that may be heavy enough or thick enough gauge. I probably will go ahead and build the headlamps. They're kind of patinaed for now, let's put it that way. But I can always take them apart and repaint them later. And I still need to do the bits of brackets and things. Even without the new hinges, I think I know now pretty much where they're going to go. You can see I actually marked the positions based off that original door I've got. So I can now do the metal work to make the bracketry that goes in here, and kind of ties all of this together. I think that's probably the only bracketry I need. The other thing I want to do is, somewhere I've actually got the proper adjustable column thing that needs to go in here, which ties the end of the column to the frame and will allow me to move it up and down a little bit. I need to figure out where I put that. So definitely heading in the right direction. Found my little clamp. That's it there. It's in two halves. It's brass that's been nickel plated. So that seems to be an original clamp. And what I will do is I will make up some brackets out of angle iron that will come down here, and they'll be slotted in the base here. I only need about 1.5 inches of steering column adjustment, really. Maybe 2 inches. I don't think you would want it much lower than it is now, because you can't get your legs underneath the steering wheel. But you can see I can actually come up, maybe another inch there to give a bit more clearance, which might be a good idea. So I probably need about 1.5 inch slot in this, or 2-inch slot. It doesn't need to be a curved slot. There is another type of bracket, which is this one, which you can see is actually curved, but it won't matter in this case because you can shift the bracket on the column. So if you're moving the steering column, you'd loosen all of that up anyway and then take it off. And the idea of this is that you can completely remove that bracket. It'll be really awkward to get to the bolts, but if you totally remove that bracket, then the body will lift off the steering column. So you can remove the body from the car. I'm also probably going to make brackets to go in the corners here to stiffen these up, and these will also double up as the mounting brackets, because I can drill and tap them for the instrument panel. So I can put a couple of screws in at the top there, and there'll be another screw in here somewhere, and I'll probably need another couple of brackets somewhere else. Possibly in these corners I can make some sort of bracket that helps tie this to that, although it's screwed, and this is a nice strong joint because it's so big. And that should then just stiffen the top of the scuttle. Probably the same here. I'll do similar to what I did back here, where I've got this bracket that ties it all together. So the idea with the bodies like this is that the wood flexes, but the joints don't, because if the joints flex, the glue will snap eventually. So you reinforce the corners. So that'll be some of the brackets I need to make this weekend, I guess. And I think that's enough for now. Had a busy day making up for lost time during the week. I've been making more brackets to attach things. There's some of them here, but we'll get to those. So I started with the center bracket that joins this main cross piece, helps bolt all of that together. And I've been looking at all these little brackets, and I've tried to make them multi-purpose, or do more than one job, so I can minimize the number of parts and make everything much easier to assemble and disassemble, and hopefully save a little bit of weight. Not that I'm too worried about that. So all of these brackets are just made from bits of angle iron and bits of flat bar TIG welded together. This one bolts through the frame here, and it has a flat piece of angle on the bottom, and this is to help reinforce this top joint. But also you can see this hole here. That hole is for the choke cable. So on SU carburetors like this, there's the 2 choke levers, and I've got this cable set up so you can pull the chokes down. And what that actually does is it moves the jet down, which enriches the mixture. So those cables, this is it here, if it'll focus. So Silly thing. So this is the choke cable. It's kind of a locking mechanism. You pull it out and it sort of clicks into place. But these can be really stiff to operate. So I didn't want to have it just in my flimsy aluminium instrument panel, because you don't want the panel moving every time you pull the choke out. So I made that top bracket do double duty as the choke mount. So the choke will mount here, and covered in oil. I've also used that same plate as the top two mounting screws for the instrument panel. They're mounted up there. Those two little brackets on the bench, those, if I can remember which one is which. So that is this side. These ones will actually be screwed to the frame up inside there, and this face here with the screw through it fits up against the back of the instrument panel. So if we undo this, these screws are all 2BA, so they're the proper imperial screws, but a couple of wood screws to hold it, so there's why they're countersunk holes. That little bracket will go up in the corner there. It also helps reinforce this joint, but this is quite a strong joint anyway. But it'll provide another mounting location for the instrument panel, just so it doesn't sort of rattle around. The reason I haven't fitted these yet is I need to paint everything. That's what I'm going to do after this. So that will give me another mounting point for the instrument panel up in the corners here. So one here, one on the other side. And you can see there are two more down here to stop the bottom, this piece of the instrument panel rattling around. So this bracket ended up being quite involved. This is the bracket that attaches the top of the steering column and does provide me a little bit of up and down adjustment on the steering wheel. I've actually got it up as high as, it's not as high as it would go. I could trim it a little bit more from the where the steering column comes through and get maybe another ½ inch off lift out of that if I really wanted to, but this seems to work quite well for me where it is at the moment, so I'll probably just leave it. So this again is made from angle iron. This is the original clamp, so there's a screw through here and there's a screw at the bottom that you can lock up. And again, this is just angle iron bits welded together, and I milled slots in the side here. Take the door off, might be easier to see. So you can see I've milled slots there, which is what gives me that adjustment. You do have to sort of loosen all of this off, and then you can move it up and down. The steering box is held in a clamp at this end, so if you loosen these two bolts, this whole thing can tilt. And you can see how I machined up two little bosses, and those are welded onto the bracket, and that's what's providing this lower mounting for the instrument panel. And in order to get the holes in the right place, it gets a bit tricky, so I did have to make use of the right angle drill a lot to get some of these holes, which are quite tight, quite close to some of the timber. For these ones, you can see the hole goes right through, and I did that for two reasons. One, it means you can drill a hole through the bracket, you can tap the little boss all the way through, and then when you want to weld it, you put a screw through from this side, which holds it in place while you weld it. And then I could take that screw out, put the instrument panel in place, and run a drill bit through from this side to get the screw hole in exactly the right place. So that worked out quite neatly. And the idea of all of this is you can take this all apart and lift the body off pretty easily. And in order to make it easy to get to, this isn't a bolt, this is actually a stud through here. And if we look on the other side, I made a head, so it's kind of like a captive stud, I guess you would call it. So this is actually the head of the stud, so this can't rotate because it rubs up against against here. So you don't need a spanner, you only need to tighten the nut on this side, and it holds in place nicely. So that reduces the amount of fiddling you have to do. I've just realised that's not fully home. So because the car is so small, you want everything to be easy to get to. So I prefer using threaded plates or captive nuts, things like that, so you don't have to try and get to both sides of things to loosen and tighten them. It's the idea anyway. So this one, it looks like it would be hard to get to when the skin's here, but of course you have to remember the door is down here, so you can actually get to the back of the instrument panel through the door, which is interesting, because the opening is so deep, because you need to get your legs through. The other thing I did is I made sure that the width of this means I can actually get one of the gauges in there from the other side, obviously, but it'll fit between those, which is how it was done on some of the originals. I was looking at pictures of the original instrument panel layouts, and I don't exactly know what sort of bracketry they used, but the originals seem to have a couple of bolts where it's either 2 or 4 bolts here and a gauge in the middle. So there's obviously some bracketry behind here. This is my best guess at what that may look like, or rather what works for me. The bolts that are holding those brackets in place are all set into the timber. There's going to be a combing panel that goes all the way around here. It actually goes all the way around, across the top of the doors, all the way up around the back there. I was thinking about how to make that, and I think that will be a sort of steel panel or aluminium panel cut to the right shape, a strip of metal. And I think what I can do is weld studs to the back of it and drill holes through the frame. I won't need very many, so probably a hole here, one there, and one along there, and that will clamp that piece of metal. You can then clamp it, probably just with wing nuts or something, to the front of this. And I'll have to figure out how you actually make the combing, but I think what you could do, I had some paper, so if this is your piece of metal with studs coming out the back, threaded stud, I think what you could do is the combing seems to have like a welt, like a piping thing on the edges. So I think if you made something like this, where this is kind of the fabric and there's padding in here, this would give you the nice piping around the edges. You can fold the back side of that around behind the panel, probably glue it, and then when you clamp this all up to the timber, it'll hold everything in place. It must be something like that. I'm not actually sure how they do that, but I believe it'll be something similar to that. And I should be able to do the same for around the top of the doors here and all the way around there. It's going to be interesting shaping the piece of metal for this piece, but you just make a paper template and unfold it, and that'll give you the flat shape to cut out of the steel. Something like that. I may have to rethink that, but that's the plan for now. So that's all coming on really nicely. That really makes the instrument panel a lot more rigid, and it means I can use the layout that's pretty similar to the original one. All my gauges are stuck on that at the moment, so I may just stick those in place and see how I can actually arrange it. The choke pull doesn't get too close to the steering wheel. There's still room there, but you're not going to hit your hands on that or hit your fingers on that when that's pulled out. I did check that. It doesn't pull out that far. But yeah, that should give a really nice solid, I mean that's very solid, place for mounting the choke. Even on my MGB, the choke always feels almost a little flimsy in the steel instrument panel. So that was my way of getting around that. So now I'm going to take all of that apart so I can paint everything. I've got things sitting in front of the little diesel heater warming up the paint and warming up that area. So I'll paint those tonight. It's still pretty cold here. And I think I can also get rid of my temporary instrument panel now and maybe start thinking about making some holes in this one. I am a little bit worried it's not going to be rigid enough. So I may either have to get something thicker or put some stiffening pieces into that, or possibly even get some thin plywood and glue that to the inside of it just to increase the stiffness a little bit. But we'll see. I'm just worried that when I cut all the holes for the instruments, it's going to make it all floppy. So I think now I'll clean up these parts and start painting things. Just a quick shot with the instrument panel removed. It just makes it a bit easier to see the bracketry in there and the little standoffs that hold the bottom of the instrument panel in place. And that's the choke bracket one. Just got a small amount of car stuff done today. I went out this morning and went and visited Southwards. I like going there just to look at the old cars. It sort of inspires me sometimes, I think. And I visited the tip shop on the way home, which is always good value. And I found a couple of BSF Whitworth spanners and a little grease gun. These were 50 cents each. I got a trowel, like a garden trowel, which was another 50 cents. And I decided, instead of starting with a tractor, I should start off a little bit smaller. And I found this. So this is a old school push mower. It actually works. It seems to be really nice quality. And I thought, oh, I'll grab that and I'll just clean it up. This cost all off $5. So about £2.50 for the UK people. And I guess about half a cheeseburger for Americans. I'm not sure. Can't remember what the exchange rate for the US is at the moment. But that should clean up really well. I'm not sure how useful it'll be, but something else to do. Let's see. On the car, I've just been, I made a fake seat back out of some foam and a piece of string and a pillowcase. The seat, the padding on the seat will have to be really thin if you want to sit so that you're in the very low Brooklands position where you can reach out and touch the ground, which is what I want to do. There's a famous picture of the prototype Brooklands, which may be, I think it might be Reed Railton sitting in it, but reaching out and touching the ground over the side of the car. And that's the low look is what I want. I want it really down low. So minimal amount of padding. I have bolted the timber piece to the cross member now. Still trying to figure out exactly where I'm going to mount those belts. I still think probably sort of in there is going to be the best way, unless I can just bolt them straight to the cross member there. It's a little bit tricky because you can't get right up into the corner. You can only get so far because of the chassis rail. But I extended the slot in the instrument panel so I can get the wheel up just a little bit higher, about an extra ½ inch. That's in the highest position now. I don't think you'd want to lift it up any more than that, and dropping it down any lower than that makes it a bit painful getting in and out. That's the choke pull in place. I did forget that the body of the choke pull isn't circular. It's actually got flat sides, so I could have filed a hole so that it means the choke can't rotate, which they do sometimes do if they come loose, although that one's only finger tight and it's pretty solid. So I think once it's all bolted up, that'll be fine, because it is bolting to a nice piece of steel and not a flimsy piece of aluminium or sheet metal. Still figuring out where the gauges will go. Speaking of the gauges, actually, I forgot to show this the other day. I did redo the the face and the housing of my rev counter. That's actually a vinyl sticker that I had made, cut out inside there. They did make it slightly smaller diameter than it should have been, which was annoying, but I was able to black around the outside and it came out okay. You can see I just put red marks. It's red on the vinyl at 4.5, so this will go around to 5,000. It'll go past. It used to go to 4,000. It'll go past that, no problem. So that will be the rev counter, mechanical rev counter, which will go in the car. I finally got to remove my temporary wooden instrument panel, which I was very pleased about. So that was good. You can see the running of the choke cable there and how it goes down to the little block that clamps it to the housing there. I would have had this pushed all the way up against here so it can't slide. I don't think it can slide anyway. Problem then is it'll foul the throttle linkage. You can see it only just clears the choke. Again, everything's really tight on the Brooklands. And I've been mocking up in cardboard how the driver's side floor will go. This is just a rough sort of mock-up to try and figure out what the maximum amount of space I can get in the footwell is. This is going to be about right. The cardboard's a bit bent, it's not sitting flat, but it'll be something like that. And it hides the brake shaft. It goes underneath the tension rod here, and it provides nice deep wells for your heels. It works really well for me. It's set up quite nicely. So that's coming along as well. I think that's really all I have done today. I see a lot of films, some of the ones I watch from America where they're rescuing old cars that have been sitting for years. A lot of them seem full of mice and all sorts of other critters. So I've never had a problem with mice inside Big Shed. We have had mice, or we do have mice inside the ceiling of the house, but I've got traps up in there, and I do have a rat trap behind Big Shed, which is what this is, and I quite often catch rats in it. I just disposed of one, but here's a little tip. Coconut makes really good bait in mouse and rat traps. So that's just a little piece of coconut flesh. It's nice and solid. I know people recommend peanut butter and things like that, but that's just messy and you have to keep replacing it, and I've never found it actually works that well. A bit of coconut flesh will last for ages. It kind of dries out, but they still like it. You don't need to keep replacing it. This is the same piece I've had in here for multiple rats, and because it's quite tough, it means they don't just come and lick it off the trap. It'll actually set the trap off. So I use that in the house and out here behind the shed. been to the Motat aviation section. I'm just walking to the other section. I was going to get the tram, but it seemed to be late, so I'm walking through the little domain, a little park. It's quite nice. Motat was full of screaming children. This place, there's nobody around except all these bloody pukekos and pigeons. Friggin' awful birds. Oh great, now seagulls. There's actually a sign behind me saying don't feed them. And I think that's a chicken over there. Interesting. Still on my trip in Auckland, coming back home tomorrow. One of the things I wanted to do next time I was up in Auckland was come to the Domain. That's where I am at the moment. There's the museum up on the hill there. These are the sports grounds, cricket pavilion. One of the reasons I wanted to do that is people may have noticed I've got 2 oak trees growing outside my shed in pots, and one of those is I call it my memorial to my friend Mike, who died a couple of years ago of cancer. And the reason is because one of those oak trees came from an acorn I got from his back garden. The problem is I also got an acorn from here at the Domain. Both of them grew, so I don't actually know which one is Mike's memorial oak tree. So I thought I'd come to the Domain and compare the leaves, because the 2 oaks look different. They've got different sorts of leaves. But of course it's the middle of winter, so I'm surrounded by oak trees, none of which have leaves. So I'm still not entirely certain which one's Mike's oak and which one is an oak from the Domain. There are a few dead leaves around. I've got a few photos of them, so maybe I can figure it out from that. But yeah, I'll just keep those 2 oaks growing anyway. I quite like them.